Roll call, looks like everybody is here. Everybody will take a look at the agenda. I've been asked to add one thing to the agenda, and we do that under new business, under B, and that would be possible payment of authority board members.
Whose idea was that?
Mine.
Yours? Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
And move to support or approve the agenda as presented.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, if everybody would take a look at the minutes. No one has any problems, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Financial reports, Sue?
Everyone's fourth quarter payments are in. I believe I'm still waiting on for Jen's fourth quarter. Currently, the authority has $251,000 in cash. If you look at the revenue expenditure report, you see the $4,000 in activity for this month. That's the monies we received from Ranger Bid for the selling of the vehicles.
That 4,355?
Yes. I have all the copies of the bills here if anyone has any questions on the accounts payable.
I'd just like to know on the 330, the $12,000 operating supplies, 12,300. What is it? It says operating supplies. That's the first on your statement sheet.
Who's the check to?
Pardon?
I'm sorry, who was the check made out to?
Psycho Control Corporation.
Okay. That is for the Lucas chest compression units. We received a grant from the Grand Rapids Foundation for $12,300, and we paid the $4,000 out of fund balance.
Yep. Well, as soon as you said what it was,
Yep.
yeah, I know.
So we still have 2 more months to finish this fiscal
We do.
year, correct?
Yes, till June 30th.
We got payroll for this month, next month.
And also, the July payroll is accrued back to June, so we
Okay.
have 3 pays.
Anybody have any questions on financial? Do I hear a motion to approve the financial report?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the floor is open for anyone who wants to make a public comment. Any public here? All right, we'll go down to old business. For any board members, you're welcome to see the UTV is sitting out there. Please take a look at it after the meeting. Ron, you just want to give us an update of?
Yeah, absolutely. Lieutenant Soika got to stay after work at Amway and was able to take the diamond plate and get it all bent up really nicely. Looks very professional. got it all put together. We did the switchgrass burn on the 29th, I believe it was. And we had 3 UTVs out here and 1 brush truck. The brush truck never left the spot where it was parked, and the UTVs handled everything. So worked out really well. We took some pictures, put them on a Facebook page for the fire department. 35 gallons of water got us through. It was one of those fires that we didn't want to put out, so we didn't have to use any water, but no, it turned out really, really nice, and I'm pretty certain, we haven't had a chance to get the final numbers from Sue yet, but I'm pretty certain we stayed right around the 3,000, if not under budget, so I think the last invoice I gave to her was for $517, and that was for when Swyka bought the diamond plate, so, but I think we're coming in under the 3,000 that we had allotted, which is good. I mean, that, as long as we can keep working that way, will everybody be happy, so.
What size water tank did we end up?
35 gallon, and a 3.8 gallon per minute external mounted pump on there.
Okay, anybody have any questions on that?
You had the 3 units out there, but which one do you think was the better, or? I mean,
Always ours.
It's.
Yeah, they're all 3 were set up differently.
No.
Yeah, no.
Canon, Altos, and ours.
Yeah, Alto set theirs up a little bit differently because they're not sure if they're going to continue the program. They want to make sure that it's something that they want to continue their program with Platinum and Yamaha. Ours, we went right ahead and made it the way that we thought would serve us the best. And Canon's was already set up that way, but theirs is a 6x6, and both of ours are 4x4s.
They pay 26,000 or something like that.
Yep, plus they have a big fancy enclosed trailer for theirs and everything, but functionality-wise, they each would serve the purpose for whatever you need to do. Other than Alto could not bring a patient out of the woods at this point. If they decide to stay with the program, then they're gonna modify theirs, but I like the way ours turned out, the functionality of it, the minimal amount of water keeps the weight down on it, so very, very pleased with the way it turned out.
Yeah, well, you have something to compare it to then too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
Why are they looking at not possibly staying with the program?
From what I understand, talking to a couple of their guys on the 29th, they're looking at the use of it. If they're actually gonna be able to utilize it enough to justify keeping it and keeping it in the program. So they wanna make sure that it's gonna fit their fleet, and they wanna make sure that they're gonna, use it more than 2 or 3 times a year. So before they pull the trigger and keep one around here.
There's no requirement by the UTV supplier of usage or anything, is there?
The only requirement that they have is if you get to 20 hours on the new motor in there, that you get a hold of them, bring it up there, pay for the service for the 20 hours. Other than that, no, there's no other requirements. So just maintaining the maintenance on it.
Okay.
And insurance.
Well, yes, the maintenance and the insurance.
Okay, the next item is, I wrote down continuation of the fund balance discussion. We left it at the last meeting that people would go back to their boards and discuss the fund balance and report back on what the thoughts were for your councils. So we'll start with Lowell Township.
They would like the balance to be held by Lowell Township.
Okay.
And, well, and also, and get the fund balance down to about 50,000, either by refunding or skip a payment.
Because one of their thoughts is about the grants too, that some grants we could lose because there's too much balance in the slush.
Okay, for Jens?
Well, yeah, it's the same as kind of like what we were expressing last time here. I mean, we were always thinking we didn't want it to get too big also. And it wasn't really the grant discussion back then, it was just, the fact that then when equipment came up and stuff, we'd have, we'd continue to be quite involved with that, so. But, I mean, once again, if the formula is working, like that last statement I made, we don't have to kick in extra money for equipment and stuff. I mean, that's the ideal situation, I think. So to build a fund balance and then at the same time still have to have, if we're thinking an additional 30 to 50,000 a year potentially for equipment, you know, it's kind of a, you know, it's like I said, it seems like it could be one or the other. You know, I mean, what's best for the fire department and everybody working together going forward. So.
Sponsored by the city?
Oh, sure, it's gonna be different.
Yeah.
Our thought, quite simply, is that rather than trying to hide money in 3 different rabbit holes, of having it all right out in the open, that the authority maintain its own money, and that we continue to build that fund equity for equipment purposes, specifically large equipment that we'll be needing in.
You say we, you mean the city?
The city, that's
Okay.
that's our take on it. We have a formula that we agreed on some years ago, and I think what we're talking about truly here is tweaking that formula. In fact, a little bigger than a tweak, maybe a twunk. And so that we're a little concerned about that. And we have something that seems to be working quite well. I don't think that many of the, when we're going out for grants, that we should be playing games about where the money is or it, and to be a responsible fire authority, we need to have a fund balance that can support the entire operation for when we go to look for new equipment, as well as take care of the building. We'll have that discussion a little bit later.
Personnel issues.
Personnel
Looking
issues.
at pay.
There's, you know, the money belongs with the authority, and the money should be here rather than trying to hide it in 3 different holes.
I would never recommend to the city council to pull their funds. Very, very simple. We have a legal opinion. We've had a legal opinion done on this. We don't think this is. We think there's provisions in the agreement that call for that money is set aside for future capital purchases. We just don't agree with this. And quite frankly, in regards to the grant response, my understanding is the only grant we never received was the FEMA grant. Well, my understanding with the FEMA grant, those grants go to large municipalities like Detroit, Flint, Grand Rapids. They don't really gear them towards our municipalities of our nature. And I know that these guys have done an excellent job in securing grants for the department. Quite frankly, you're talking about a 30% fund balance right now with the current fund balance compared to what they generate. That is a modest fund balance. You start going to 50%, now you're getting into the 10%. And even a strong fiscal policy would be to have a minimum of a 15% reserve. That's a minimum. We're not at 100% fund balance, we're only at 33%. And to pull the money out or miss a payment, which would be a breach of your agreement, I can never recommend that.
What is our fund balance right now, Sue?
Well, last audit was like 160, then we paid for 40,000 for air compressor, another 4,000 for the chest compressors. We're down to about 120.
So we've got kind of a mixed bag here.
I think Lowell Township Board based that on the fund balance being high enough that it was a problem getting grants. And if it was in a separate account, just for major purchases, and I don't like your comment about hiding it in rabbit holes, that's not the idea. I think you need to use a little different language when you mention that. Just my opinion.
But you'd be generating the interest off it, not the authority.
Yes.
Correct.
And the authority should be generating interest off from it. If the authority's gonna do it and generate interest, I think the Lowell Township Board would agree with that, if it didn't hinder getting grants. That was what the whole thing was based on. Hey, if it's gonna hinder them getting grants, we'll keep it here.
So we determine our balance fund based on our cash less any payments that are due, correct? We don't have a separate fund for balance, do we?
No, it's determined at the end of the auditors actually determine our fund balance. That's part of the audit process.
Maybe we ought to take a look at having some type of designation for fund balance, i.e. future equipment or...
Can I briefly at the grant stuff? FEMA is the biggest issue with grants and having a fund balance. They look at that as a unallocated funding. Exactly what you're saying. If we would call it a sinking fund, capital improvement fund, so on and so forth, if the items we're asking for through FEMA don't fall under that capital improvement, so capital improvements outlined for apparatus replacement, emergency equipment replacement, so on and so forth, but if we're asking for turnout gear, chest compression devices, airboats, things like that, that aren't outlined in that, we're not sitting with slush fund as they see it.
That makes sense.
Sue, can we get in touch with Stephen and ask him if we could come up with a category or maybe several categories to put fund balance in? Maybe one for equipment and one for operating fund balance, have two.
Okay.
And set a limit for that, and based on that, anything over that, we either adjust our budget accordingly, or there is somewhat of a rebate back to the municipalities.
Can we do that? Because we have a formula that says we're all paying in whatever amounts that we're paying in. I've kind of thought that we needed to hold to that. Otherwise, we need to amend the agreement. I don't think the agreement currently has a vehicle for refunding or accessing money. I don't remember that anymore.
Well, our accountant did say that if we determined to disperse any excess fund balance back, and that was in the letter he gave us last time, we could just reduce the payment due on a given quarter.
That's what the accountant may say, but is that what it says in the agreement? I don't think, you know,
I've never seen the legal agreement. I got it right here.
I'm not sure the agreement's that specific.
The payment is the way you set the budget. I mean, how much you set in the budget is how it is paid.
each year we have a formula.
It's all in, yeah, you just lower everybody's payment as a budget. If all the formulas stay the same, you just, instead of X number of dollars you're aiming for, you just reduce it 20,000, 30,000 and run the budget for the formula for that amount versus the, you know, that much more.
But you still have the formula that states how much money you are going to give that each
municipality is paying,
yeah.
Yeah, each unit is paying for it, but it doesn't have, you don't have to be set at 500,000. The budget could be at 300,000, so everybody would be paying less according to the formula versus on the 300,000 versus on a 500,000.
And we've started that reduction process.
Yeah, we did
in
that.
the budget year.
Can you get in touch with Steve Thompson and discuss this, and maybe we'll have to take a closer look at the numbers and see what he comes up with, but we have reduced our budget accordingly, so we should have a better feel in 2 months where we are as we end the year if our budgeting budget process is more on track with actual.
Peter, did you happen to take a look at that agreement, or?
Well, no, I'm familiar with the agreement, obviously, and we don't have any refund, payback, or provisions. We just have, you know, do our budget for next year, and then we, you know, divide the budget among the members accordingly. I was just thinking, and I'm not an accountant and so on, but in other locations I've seen they would dedicate the sinking fund, and, you know, identify that you have a sinking fund for the building, you have a sinking fund for you know, various other things. And that does take money out of the, you know, the out of budget, your cash budget. I don't know whether that's, you know, what do they say about figures lie or liars figure or something, or do they say that about lawyers? Anyway,
I think it's lawyers.
yeah, so, yeah, I think that there could be some creative bookkeeping that would, you know, make us, or make the balance look a little bit less than what it, and we're not going down those, quote, rabbit holes because we are dedicating a certain amount of money for future purchase of equipment, are we not?
So it's more or less a reallocation.
That's what it basically would be. And I know we've got some repairs for the building. We won't be able to do that all at one time. You know, if we allocate that in a sinking fund for building maintenance or building, whatever you want to call it, you know, that would reduce that fund balance. I don't know. I leave that to the, you know, the finance people.
Well, let's talk to him, Stu,
Okay.
and maybe we can have a joint call with him in the next couple of weeks and see what he
Okay.
suggests, because his letter doesn't really address that. We went to him before.
Well, I think it is interesting that, you know, is the formula an operating formula? And if it is, then, you know, like we were putting extra in, which I don't know if the contract calls for us to put extra money in, but, you know, in good faith, we did that. We now have a fund balance. So, like you're saying, do we adjust the budget to reflect strictly an operating budget? Or do we allow it to run, so it runs as an equipment building budget, a building maintenance budget, those type of things too? And it sounds to me like we might have that flexibility to work with. I don't know what you see in the contract there, but.
Basically, the agreement basically says that the agreement is silent regarding unspent funds, but it also, there in section 2.2, it says, there's clear and rather strongly stated the board is encouraged to set aside funds in the form of reserves to defray budget deficits and future capital purchases.
So, there it is.
So I think back to our discussions of the municipalities need to be reserving money like we have in the past for our, you know, like our trucks and things like that and stuff. It sounds to me now like we may be trying to possibly build that into our budget,
Yeah,
or,
that's right.
yeah?
That's right.
Okay.
And then instead of
Because I didn't understand that before, and I think that's where we're coming from here.
Because
you know.
you're having that fund, a capital improvement fund, or whatever you want to call it, or sinking fund. You're putting that in there. and
The one we
everyone's
don't
contributing.
have now.
Right, but we're
That we
putting
haven't
that,
had
yeah.
before.
But then it also then eliminates, should eliminate the situation where we're asking, okay, Virgins, we need to get you to provide more money so that we can get to purchase a truck or something like that.
Right, but even before the fire authority, and now up to this point into the fire authority, the policy, or, you know, what has always been in the past has been, we've been doing that. We've been preparing to drop money in and do those
But if
things.
we had that fund, I think that would, then you can orderly figure out exactly when you're ready.
Right, so I'm just trying to build a case for this discussion isn't completely out in left field. You know what I'm saying? Where the municipality might say, hey, you know, okay, you know, so like we've talked about in the past, the fire authority, the fire department has 50,000, 100,000, whatever it is. We understand having a balance to operate on and stuff.
Right.
You know, and that's what I was getting at last time when I said, hey, if we're gonna have the formula and live by the formula and run through the formula, and then the authority sits out here and they know what they got to work with, plan with equipment and things like that, we're still approving it or whatever, or we continue how we have in the past. And I think that's where we're going back and forth at the municipality level with the townships. You know what I'm saying? The city's like, hey, you guys, here's the money, take the money, budget it, and then you don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you know.
Right.
Where you gotta, you know, I mean, I know you got a whole bunch of different departments.
Right. But what we're really talking about is a reallocation of funds, to put money aside.
On the accounting side, I
Right.
understand that. I understand that.
And I think that the Lowell Township Board would not be against that. I can't speak for them, but the issue was there was a grant that they couldn't get because the fund balance was too high. If it's in a sinking fund, I
Whatever
think
you
they
want to
would
call
agree to
it.
that.
Yeah, that eliminates that
Yeah.
situation.
Well, but for us, from Virgin's Township though, I mean, it's always been, hey, if the fire department needs money, give them more money, you know what I mean? And if it's a cash operating budget, that makes sense, you know what I mean? We approve the budget for the fire department to operate, when they need equipment purchases, boom. You know, we're dropping money in for that, but it looks like, you know, it's more than that now, you know, because there is a cash fund balance building, and so then it's like, hey, so the fire department, it's kind of self-funding itself through the formula right up into equipment.
Right.
You know where I'm coming from?
Yeah, but Tim, you know that in your, fund balance, whether you put it down in a line item budget or not, you know you're gonna be spending, you've committed some future expenditures out of that fund balance.
I understand that.
You
Yeah,
know, and that isn't reflected. You, the board knows, Sue knows that you've committed or earmarked 40,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 for that. And if we just show that on our statements, I think that'll put everybody's, and the other advantage of that, of course, is that you don't get a surprise at the end of the year or sometime saying, hey, we need another $50,000 or we need another $100,000 for something. I don't think the townships and the city would be pleased to get that kind of surprise.
well, no,
Well,
that's
I
why
think
we.
these guys are doing a lot better job of that now.
And no
Yeah,
surprises.
that's why we've
best
had the
surprise.
equipment, future equipment purchase discussions and things.
Well, that's why the agreement is involved to start with, is because of the, what he just said, because of the surprises the township got. All of a sudden, they need a new fire truck, and they come to the township and say, it's time to, you know, and that's where the agreement started.
And that's where you start talking about the capital improvement fund or sinking fund, where you have money set aside.
Right, the thing of it is though, when it runs through the formula, and this is a political issue more than it is maybe a fire authority discussion and stuff, is, you know, the municipalities, you know, I mean, I've brought this up before, you know, the formula is really favoring the city at this point when, you know, in our opinion, so.
But then you have to look at what constitutes that formula, what's going on, because Virginia's is growing, having more runs, having, you know, more housing, greater values, and so when all that happens, it's clearly growing a lot faster than the city is.
So you're just trying to get ahead of it?
Well, I mean, it's a reality, it's a reality. You
Well,
know?
the reality
two
is,
townships
though,
are-
I'm looking at it today, I've looked at it for the last 8 years,
Right,
and it isn't there yet, Dave.
well, but you take a look at all these homes that are being built.
Okay, well, we're getting off track here.
Like I
So,
said, it's a political
Okay,
discussion.
well,
let's talk to Steve and see what, run this by him, see what ideas he has on this. Because not only will we have to run, if we call it a sinking fund, we have to come up with probably some mechanism to fund those if need be down the road. If it gets depleted, so that'll have to be discussed.
And perhaps at our next meeting in July, we should maybe have Steve here.
We've tried that numerous times, he's not very available. But we will try again.
Well, maybe we
we need to have somebody there.
Maybe we need a different account.
Okay, the next item is a review of the firehouse improvement bids and possible actions. Along with that, I asked Peter after the last meeting to look at commercial agreements, as that's kind of how this firehouse is within the agreement. So I'm going to turn it over to Peter to start with.
Sure. What I did, and I did not know, Jim, how far you wanted me to go with that. I pulled two agreements. One is a rather straightforward Michigan agreement that you can see that's a couple, 2 or 3 pages. And then I pulled one from California that includes everything as to what you do with cockroach infestation, to everything. I mean, this is, what, 15 pages or so on. And I would use that second one as a checklist if you would, and that's basically what I did, is just pulled out forms. I have not done any work on it. Jim, if, you know, tell me the parameters you want, and I can draft an appropriate agreement using that and some other forms for that. These are both commercial, private, not municipal agreements. They talk about taxes, and we, of course, would not be referencing taxes in our agreement, I don't think.
Because basically my concern is that in the original agreement for the authority, the city leased the authority this building for $1, but there's no real tie to what that constitutes as far as costs or responsibility or anything else.
Well, that's the nice thing about an agreement. It identifies what the duties and obligation of both parties are, regardless whether it's $1 or $100,000. You know that you know, you paint the blue lines and they paint the yellow lines, and I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I've been tied up on some other issues recently, but the council's on board with that. I'm gonna have that ready for the June meeting. And I'll make sure you get a copy of it, obviously.
And I would ask that Peter become involved in it
Absolutely,
too.
absolutely.
So your folks are going to draft the...
I'll have my attorney draft it, yep.
Okay.
Okay, now we'll go to Ron, and where are we? You had a bunch of estimates, and where are we? Let's discuss the
Right, I emailed out the spreadsheet to everybody, and that was a couple months ago, I think, when we emailed it out to everybody to give you kind of breakdown of who was quoting what as far as the jobs and things go, but as in most of that type of industry, 30 to 90 days is pretty much the max that an estimate's gonna hold, and they're gonna honor it. So I guess that's part of the conversation that Jim and I had the other day, was we need to think about if we're gonna move forward with this, and right now, it sounds like it's still a little up in the air as to how this is all gonna work out, so.
Let's put it this way, Ron. Is there anything that's critical? I know you've done a lot of the internal stuff. Your guys have done a tremendous job doing some internal things. Anything that they haven't done, is there anything that's critical that needs the doors or windows or any items that need to be taken care of?
So we do have one man door on the back side of the building over here that is non-functional at this point. So as far as critical, that would probably be on the top of the list, would be that one particular door.
What do you mean it's not functional?
You can't get in or out that door.
You get it, the jam is
The
swollen.
jam is swollen, and it's just the expanding and contracting, it's just, basically bonded it shut. So that door is, if there's anything critical around here, it would be that man door.
Emergency exit that's locked.
And we like to use our shoulders to hit doors, and it's not working for us.
Okay.
So.
Is that the only thing?
As far as critical, I'd like to see done as soon as possible, yes. I mean, the windows, obviously, that we'd love to see that done before the wintertime gets here, make the building more efficient. I mean, there's plenty of things, but on the top of the list would be that one door.
Well, I would say there's probably, you got a bid for that, as I remember, it was like about $1,300 or something like that.
Yeah, we got a separate bid for doing the 3 service doors from a company called Discount Door. They're out of Jennison or
Right.
Granville. So, yeah, we did get a separate bid from him to do those, so.
Was it inclusive that you had to do all 3?
No, it was not.
Is the agreement just gonna be, though, that we're gonna take care of the building at the end of the day?
Basically,
I mean,
yeah, I mean, really the only thing we would probably is if we ever needed to do an expansion, which I doubt. I mean, that's kind of what the agreement.
you'd have to approve it or get
Yeah.
involved with it or
But
whatever.
the problem is, you know, really the problem is gonna be is if you want us to, you know.
So in good faith, I would feel comfortable with just doing what we think we wanna do, you know what I mean? They're gonna work out this agreement, it's not really gonna change how we do business at all, because the fire authority's gonna be paying for it.
And typically, agreements go forward, not
Right.
back, so whatever future considerations we get.
Well, right now, we have in the maintenance budget enough money to cover that door
Right,
repair.
yep.
But if we're gonna do all the doors, I'm sure that they would prefer to do them all at once.
It would make it,
You know,
it would
I
make
mean,
more
you're-
sense for the contractor to come out here
Yeah.
one time, one trip.
I'd be in
you know.
favor of,
Actually, it's gonna be more than just one time and one trip, because he's not gonna be able to get all three done in a single day anyway. But,
So the outstanding bids are for those 3 doors, for the windows
in the entryway,
and the entryway.
correct. Those are the 3 bids that we put out for, yes.
Were the windows separate from the entryway?
I believe that every one of them was broke down per the project, the different aspect of the project, yes.
The entryway would have to be handicap accessible then?
Well, I can't find anything to show that we have to have a button or anything put on that door. But I mean, right now, we've had
Yeah.
plenty of times where there's been folks in the wheelchairs able to get in and out.
But
So,
we're grandfathered in right now. I don't know if we upgraded, if there's gonna be something else we have to
Right.
do.
and there was discussion about that before.
Yeah.
do you think this would qualify for community development money at all, or are you familiar with that?
You know, it would, it could actually.
We have money we can't ever allocate.
Do you get
half the
your,
time.
do you get your, so you get your allocation from the county, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, we opted out of the county program, but I wish you could check.
We'd
with
be
your-
happy to swing money this way out of that. you
Yeah, I
know.
think you could,
If-
you know.
I
Tim,
just thought of that on the fly.
I went through that process before to get that money.
What about that new, don't they have somebody new? They always have somebody new that's like, yeah, we're gonna figure out.
To get a little bit of money that we would have to put towards that, the paperwork involved is.
Well, we always allocate money to the senior center
Yeah, we do too.
and Hope Network, and that's the only 2 that we have
Yep.
that qualify that we
Right.
can, and we give them all they'll take or whatever, but if this would qualify, you know. Yeah, Peter could probably figure out how to take it.
It would, actually, I know, because I've done handicap projects with CDBG in my former city. So it is something that you could do. The question's gonna be whether or not, my question would be is whether or not they're gonna allow you to bring your funds into the city of Lowell when we're not a participant in the county entitlement.
We already
program.
do it with the senior center.
Oh, you do? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We do it
Well,
with-
maybe you're right, you probably could, because we used to do the same thing with our senior center, and it wasn't the city, so I think.
And this is not a city of Lowell facility.
True, it's an authority,
That's
yeah,
why I was
okay.
wondering if we could,
No, you're,
we could allocate whatever,
We could.
we'd allocate whatever we could,
I think you could,
you know what I'm saying?
I think you could.
You
More
do
think
that
about
for
it.
us?
Huh?
You do that for us?
What a nice guy.
Money to the
What a guy.
historic museum going on too.
What a guy.
All right, well, from this, where do we want to go? Do we want to put this on a hold to see whether we can get money, or to go ahead with some of these projects, or what?
I would put it on hold for that. The other projects, maybe this, the door.
I'd put the door on hold to find out what the handicap regulation's gonna be, 'cause that could be huge.
Yeah, I think probably get your doors fixed if you're lined up with it.
But like that back door.
Let's,
they-
Ron, let's go ahead with the doors. Let's get them taken care of, since you have a malfunctioning door. Have them do all 3.
Okay,
And then we'll discuss the windows and the front.
What 3 doors are you gonna do?
They're 3-man doors.
yes, there's this one here,
Okay,
and there's one on the far end down by our old garage, and then there's one on the south side of the building.
okay.
It's by door number 1, by bay number 1.
Yeah, I agree with that, having the doors.
Oh.
Doors done now.
Sure. I am not that
Then talk
sensitive.
about the other stuff. This front door, I'm afraid that if Tim does the money, gives the money or whatever from Virginia's Township, that if you do it that way, you're gonna have to do jumping through so many hoops, it's gonna cost you more than what you're gonna get anyhow. You can just do it without having to cross all the Ts, and you still have to do the handicap stuff, but when we did it to the township, we would have been farther ahead not using township or that kind of money because we had to do everything just so. And we could have just spent the same, or even a little less money and had it all done without the hassle of the paperwork to get all the stuff in line to do it. So, not to say, you know, you might want to try.
I'm not passionate about it.
I know.
It's just tossing it out there.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that you can try it, but I'm just saying don't get.
Okay, well, let's go ahead with the improvements on the door.
Okay.
Tim, can you look into this funds, and then we'll discuss the windows in the front
Yeah, I'll make
next
a phone call.
month.
Do you need a motion for that? To do the doors?
Probably.
I'd make a motion to do the 3 doors and the stuck one too or something, or just the 3?
The 3
That is one of the stuck ones.
Stuck one is one of
Do the 3 doors.
I hear a second.
I'll second.
All, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. The other thing that we ought to take a look at, did you ever get a bid for doing the stucco and the joint improvement?
That was through Mark Batchelor. He was the only one that quoted on that particular part of it. Because he's the only one that we have that I know of in the area that does the
All
ceiling.
right, we ought to see if you can get that revisited again, and we'll discuss that next month, because that's something, we don't want to go into next winter with some of the conditions we have on the
Yeah,
outside.
the tuck pointing and everything on there. Yeah.
Okay, the next item is Peter put some information together on firearm verbiage or language, so I'll turn it over to him.
I prepared a report for the board, and basically what I said that we have 2 options. One option is to prohibit the possession of firearms by firefighters while on duty, or not to prohibit the possession of pistols by firefighters while on duty. And just let me quickly review. So you have 1 yes, 1 no. And let me review quickly the law. The Michigan law provides that through the concealed pistol licensing law that including firefighters can carry their weapons if properly licensed and so on. But the employer can regulate or prohibit, whether it's a fire department or Board of Education or whoever it is, or Amway, can prohibit firearms or regulate firearms at the workplace. I would be amiss by not mentioning civil liability. We have, you know, the general tort liability, the negligence, gross negligence, and so on that might occur. And then the other one that we don't talk about too often is the civil rights liability. And specifically, I want to call out the negligent entrustment, the negligent training, the negligent supervision, or so on, that goes into that whole area. And then, of course, we know that there's no exemption from the criminal liability if there are criminal violations by the firefighters. The next item, item that I want to address is the public policy issue that we should consider. What is the community support regarding the firefighters carrying weapons on duty? Do they support it or don't they support it? We've had some blowback in other communities where government employees were carrying guns, and that did not turn out well in response to by the community and so on. So I just point that out. And then the question is, should the public be aware of the board's policy? But that's a decision. So then regarding insurance, that was a big question mark about insurance. And you remember the letter that we got from the insurance folks that basically says the Risk Control Department's position is that we strongly recommend our entities, and we have to read this carefully, our entities insured not carry during the course of their employment while acting on behalf of the insured liability or insured entity. So, having considered all of that, I provided 2 options for you. Option number 1 is the one that we discussed previously. I've modified that a little bit based on some of the input that I heard at the table from the chief and so on. And basically it defines what the firearm is, it defines what the on duty is. But the operative language that we've modified is that in the event that a member is unable to secure the firearm prior to leaving on the fire or emergency service calls, the firefighter shall, number one, exhaust the firefighter's best efforts prior to driving to the scene or station house, entering the station house, or authorized vehicle engaging in fire or rescue service to stow the firearm in a secured and locked place, such as a safe or locker. 2, the second condition would be that the firefighter, if the firefighter is unable to safely stow the firearm, the firefighter shall exercise all measures to avoid any mishaps with the firearm. And then 3, as soon as practically possible, advise the supervisor that the firefighter is in possession of a firearm. And then the exception, of course, is not applicable to law enforcement officers in the authority's jurisdiction. The second option that I have for you is not to prohibit the carrying of pistols pursuant to the CPL legislation, again, while on duty, and that if the firefighter complies with all government requirements and regulations regarding the possession and use of the pistol, recognizes the on-duty definition that I previously articulated above, then assumes a liability for the consequences of possessing the pistol while on duty and hold the board and its member harmless from any liability that may arise from the firefighter's possession or use of the pistol while on duty, and then recognize and acknowledge that the possession and use of the pistol while on duty is for personal reasons and not a requirement of the firefighter's duty. And then it goes on, recognize and acknowledge, the firefighter shall recognize and acknowledge that the possession and use of the pistol is not within the scope of employment or the exercise of governmental function. I put that in because that's specific language that the insurance people used in their letter. And then that the firefighter is responsible for the safekeeping and use of the pistol. And then we have the final requirement that the firefighter has read, understood, and accepts the condition and acknowledges this by signing and submitting this or a similar form to the fire chief. And that are the 2 options that I would leave for you. The thing I'm concerned about, I don't want to create liability on the board's part or the city's or any of the jurisdictions that are members of this board where we don't have liability. So one is the prohibition with, that's the policy of the board would be to prohibit, or the other one is not to prohibit, but with the provisions about acknowledging that they be used in a safe manner and to hold the city, or I'm sorry, hold the board and the authority harmless from any liability of any misuse of that firearm or of that pistol.
Since we have 3 firefighters here, I'd like your opinions as far as what you feel as far as Carrie on a call.
I clearly stated mine when I changed the verbiage and what we had for our SOGs. I mean, you can go back as far as 2015 where these guys were just getting whacked. You know, they're getting called just recently within the last 3 weeks of showing up for medical just so they could get ambushed.